Previously on WandaVision. I'm Wanda.
I'm, Geraldine.
Wanda.
Who is that?
Wanda. You've got two healthy baby boys on your hands.
Is Geraldine inside with Wanda? Can you believe it? Twins.
She's new to town.
No home.
What do you mean she has no home?
She came here because we're all...
She came here because we're all what?
What is that symbol?
Wanda.
No. I think you should leave.
Okay, so WandaVision episode 4 titled We Interrupt This Program is officially out. Now, this episode could be considered as filler, which I would disagree and say that even if it is, it's very much needed filler to provide us with some exposition that can help us understand the story so far from a real world perspective, and not just from within Westview, which apparently isn't a real place? Or maybe it is, but people just don't know about it? I don't know, but to be honest, I'm not sure anyone does at this point. This episode is very much a recap of the first 3 episodes, but from a real-world perspective, and definitely has S.W.O.R.D. as its focus rather than Wanda and Vision. Now, if you're not familiar with them, S.W.O.R.D. is a sort of offshoot of S.H.I.E.L.D., which deals with more extraterrestrial problems. Although, if you've been watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. lately, I'd say they got that side of things pretty covered too. Interestingly enough, in the comics, S.W.O.R.D. stands for Sentient World Observation and Response Department, which, much like how the MCU changed the S.H.I.E.L.D. acronym, it also changed S.W.O.R.D.'s, ever so slightly to Sentient Weapon Observation and Response Division. And it looks like that this is a result of an astronaut training program that S.W.O.R.D. is working on, and has shifted away from the manned mission and refocused on robotics, nanotech, and AI, hence sentient weapons. Now, what that space mission involves exactly, I don't know, but perhaps it has something to do with Nick Fury's little space vacation that we saw him on at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home. This episode tells us that the show is the first thing in the MCU timeline to take place after Avengers Endgame, as it opens up right after Hulk's snap, as people are starting to blip back into reality, and one of those people just so happens to be none other than Monica Rambeau. As she slowly reappears, we see that she's sitting in a visitor's chair in a hospital room. She then leaves the room in search for answers to what's going on and where is her mum. Now, you guys remember Maria Rambeau from Captain Marvel, right? Her best friend? Okay, well, it turns out that she's actually the founder of S.W.O.R.D. and was its director until she got sick and ended up in the hospital, dying 3 years ago of cancer, leaving S.W.O.R.D. with a new acting director, Tyler Hayward, who is actually an original character for the MCU, and someone who, for some reason, I don't trust one bit. We actually see a picture of Maria up on the wall of the S.W.O.R.D. headquarters lobby. Notice how it's titled Maria Photon Rambeau. Well, this is actually one of Monica's superhero aliases when she gets her powers in the comics. She's also been known as Pulsar and Spectrum, but I'm guessing that she'll probably go with Photon as a nod to her mum's codename. Monica is actually a captain within S.W.O.R.D., but gets benched from any sorts of extraterrestrial missions as a final demand of her mum's reign as director, who suspected that she, along with everyone else, would return one day. So she's sent to New Jersey to investigate a missing persons case with the FBI, where she is met by none other than Jimmy Woo. Yes, the guy from Ant-Man and the Wasp. We see that Jimmy is parked just outside Westview talking to some cops who seem to think that Westview doesn't even exist, which suggests to me that this whole thing, even the town itself, is a fabrication, or perhaps even that there's been some mind-warping shenanigans going on. In this episode, we actually see a lot of the things that don't belong in Westview and how they got there in the previous episodes, such as how the toy helicopter from episode 2 is actually a S.W.O.R.D. drone. We see Jimmy Woo trying to contact Wanda through the radio, we see Monica get sucked in through the barrier, and we also see a S.W.O.R.D. agent in a hazmat suit try to enter Westview through an underground passageway, but gets turned into a beekeeper, and that leaves Wanda saying,
No.
Another character from the MCU that returns in this episode is Darcy Lewis, as she's brought onto the investigation as an astrophysics expert, and is in fact the one who seems to be the most equipped to find out what's actually going on. Actually, this is a pretty cool episode for how it shows S.W.O.R.D. asking the same questions that we as spectators are, such as why the hexagonal shape, why sitcoms, are they in the same time and space as the rest of the MCU, and is Vision still alive? We also see on Jimmy Woo's whiteboard that Skrulls are being suspected as the culprits for this whole thing, which doesn't really make sense considering that Maria is the founder of S.W.O.R.D. and she knew the Skrulls and how that they were not bad guys. So I don't know why they would be suspecting Skrulls as the culprits behind this thing, but it's a pretty cool Easter egg. We see the S.W.O.R.D. agents watching the show like we are to help them figure out who some of Wanda and Vision's neighbours actually are. For example, the Hearts from episode 1 are Todd and Sharon Davis, who aren't references to Marvel Comics and none of the other neighbours are, because believe me, I've checked. But Sharon Davis is actually the name of a real-life supervising art director for the show, so that's pretty cool. We also find out that Herb is a man named Josh Collins. Vision's co-worker Norm is actually, shit. I'm gonna butcher the hell out of this name, aren't I? Hold on a minute, I'll get it. Abhalash? Is that it? That's it. Abhalash Tandon. There we go. Jones, Dottie's husband and the mustache man, is actually a man named Harold Copter. Wanda's friend, Beverly, who I actually don't remember, is played by Isabel Matsuida. And interestingly enough, missing from the lineup of characters and their real-world counterparts are Dottie and Agnes. However, Agnes has a dossier put up on the board of faces, but is the only one missing a driver's license, whereas Dottie is missing entirely. And I suspect that this is because they are both indeed witches.
You know, being a man of science, witches.
The voice in the radio at the pool club that we saw in episode 2, we know was obviously Agent Woo, though the version of the call we actually saw doesn't get transmitted exactly the same in the MCU version of the WandaVision show, which suggests that someone is censoring the broadcast, as Darcy later explains. I wonder who? I don't know. Yeah, Mephisto. We then pick up at the end of last week's episode where Wanda goes all psycho on Monica, and this time we actually get to see a lot more, such as her forcing her out of the bubble and having to repair the walls that she broke with her powers. Interestingly enough, Wanda actually looks quite distraught about what she's done, perhaps suggesting that she's also being manipulated? Vision then enters the house as we see Wanda hallucinate Vision's corpse from Avengers Infinity War, or his head at least, with the crushed in space that used to hold the Mind Stone. He then says to her, "We don't have to stay here. We could go wherever we want." To which Wanda replies, "No, we can't." Which is huge for the show, because it shows that Wanda is very aware of the fact that Vision is dead, and the only space where he can exist and be alive is in Westview, or her version of Westview. She then goes on to say, "I have everything under control." Yeah, I bet you do, Wanda. I bet you do. This then leads on to that big bombshell ending as we rejoin Monica on the grass outside of Westview, where she says, "It's Wanda. It's all Wanda." As we find out that she's been the one doing this to Westview and the people inside, using her reality warping abilities to pick and choose what stays and what goes within her little suburban bubble. Of course, this doesn't explain the sitcoms or the fact that both Wanda and Vision seem just as manipulated and confused by the world as everyone else, but Wanda's powers are definitely in play here, in a major way. And considering how she violently forced Monica out, it's entirely possible that the confusion on Wanda's part is all just an act. So, there we have it, the breakdown of episode 4. I really like this episode. It feels like a turning point for the show, where we'll now start to see and find out a little bit more about the reasoning behind the strange happenings in Westview and all their real-world implications. Of course, I am excited to return to the main format of the show and follow the narrative of Wanda and Vision and their suburban lives, but this one was a fun one to be sure. I also really enjoy seeing Vision's skepticism, so that last part of the episode had me kinda psyched. Not to mention getting to listen to a bit of Hendrix at the end of the episode. I mean, that was pretty awesome. Plus, I mean, come on, Voodoo Child? Seriously? Very, very appropriate. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw here today, then maybe consider subscribing to catch our other content as and when it releases.